Good evening. Thank you for your really compelling talk, and it was lovely to see those interesting examples around the country. I'm Stephanie Siebisch. I'm the director of the Tacoma Art Museum. Certainly, we're all...
Congratulations. I'm getting over there tomorrow.
Excellent. I'll be there to greet you. So I certainly signed on to my friend Debra Friedman's vision of an urban serving university. Can you talk a little bit about other anchor institutions? I know there are people in the audience who are involved with, for example, the very strong, as I like to jokingly call it, the six-pack of museums in Tacoma, from art, glass, history, children's, and so on.
I think you basically are connected to an anchor institution. And the question then becomes, what does Tacoma do? I was up in Seattle earlier today to give a little chat, and one of the things I talked about was the fact that anchor, the place that let me just step back a second. How'd I get to anchor institutions and urban serving universities? I'm an academic. I'm a contrarian. That's why I think academics really like to be contrarian. They like to really just push back. So I basically found both the left and the right in cities like Tacoma and museums to be wrong, at least by my standards. The left blamed the market and the right wanted the market to solve the problems. What we discovered in the cases that I've done and in the research that Friedman and Menendez and I have done for urban serving universities, we discovered that basically universities are non-market-based, place-based institutions. And so are museums. And so are, my friend Ira Harkavy at Penn calls them eds and meds. So are hospitals. And lately, a friend of mine named Terry Mazzani and I have said that the penultimate urban institution is the philanthropic, is the community-based foundation. But we can't do it alone. And basically, I'm going to be giving a talk in Jerusalem next week in which I'm saying that the ultimate anchor institution that really is less about enlightened self-interest and more about planning for access and freedom is the public square or public space. So there are lots of different anchor institutions. I don't like the term urban serving universities, but Debra did, others did, and it stuck. I can tell you that two things happen in universities, and I'm gonna take just one more minute to say this. And the reason I don't like urban serving universities is that I don't like the service metaphor and I don't like the outreach metaphor. The outreach metaphor is like an imperial, excuse me, I'm a researcher, and if I'm so inclined, I will reach out and I will help Tacoma. And if I don't, I won't. That's only to be matched by an interior problem for service, when you hear universities start to talk about service. First-class citizens, they do research, and they get tenure. Second-class citizens, they don't get tenure. They're on renewable contracts, maybe, and they do service. I don't like that. I don't like the internal class problems that creates, and I don't like the external outreach, the problems. I really like the idea of 360 degrees of being Tacoma. And that means museums, as we were talking about Jeannie Birch earlier today, as Jeannie Birch would talk, at Penn would talk about it, or philanthropic organizations. I did a book with Terry Mazzani, who is the head of the second largest community foundation in the United States. And he and I did this book called Here for Good that just came out a couple months ago that Ali talked about. And so in essence, there are certain institutions in a city like Tacoma, the museums, the university, the hospitals, the public square, where planners should freely produce an accessible public freedom. And that's what I would
Thank
say.
you. Just what I wanted to hear. We use language at the museum of being the community's living room.
Yeah,
We talk about
I
being
love it.
civic-minded, and I remind my staff it says Tacoma on the door. It says
You know
Tacoma
what?
Art Museum on the door.
You know, I like that so much because let me just say
You can borrow it for your next book.
Oh, I'll be there. I'll be here for a case. You'll write the chapter.
Sure. I'll get good illustrations.
Good. I'll tell you what, I'm visually illiterate, so it would be beautiful to have good. And the only thing I might even say is that on the 12th of May, the Community Foundation in Chicago is going to basically go into 10,000 people's living rooms. And we're going to have dinner all on that night. And it's simply called putting on the table the issues that matter to us. And I love that idea of producing on the table. And so being in a living room, I think even one step further is bringing that museum into people's living rooms.
Thank you. Can I, if I might squeeze in one more question while I'm standing
Sure.
here? So I heard Scott Cowan speak, the soon-to-be retiring president of Tulane University.
Yeah.
And I was in New Orleans, and I don't know my geography well enough in New Orleans to situate the university in the landscape there. But he talked about how Hurricane Katrina forever changed that institution in the sense that they had the very real option of shuttering their doors and turning into a foundation, an educational foundation, or turning around and
That's
saying,
right.
we have service in our mission and we're not living it. And how do we now serve our community and have educate our students? And how does the philosophy department serve the city? I mean, it was
the only thing I would ask Scott to do
fascinating-
is stop the service and start being New Orleans instead of being Tulane. Anyway, that's just. I think you've come a long way. The University of Washington at Tacoma comes closer to adapting a city to an educational mission than anything else, and that's
Thank
a
you.
training mission. Yeah.
Stephanie's a hard act to follow, but I'll try. My name's Jamie Chase. I own a local business that does national and international work for community development financial institutions, where we take international models where there's less bureaucracy to reduce poverty and create community and economic development opportunities. I'm wondering what you're seeing is the potential, given the federal government funds are being solicited and approved with broader community revitalization in mind. What is the role that the universities, the urban universities, can play with a combination of the Choice HUD Awards and the U.S. Treasury's Community Development Financial Institution Awards, as far as working with the cities there? If you're seeing any of that in your work and there's greater potential given the decrease in state funds.
The question is, with the federal programs that are occurring, is there a way for universities to take advantage of them? I mean, my
Right. With
what?
all of the programs that are out there.
Yeah.
And the intermediaries that you've described.
Right.
So you've cited community development corporations. We have a new $1 billion CDFI, community development financial institution in Tacoma.
Wow, that's fabulous.
They just hired us to do the work. And so if that's the case, and given the decreasing state funds, are you seeing any case models where the universities are leveraging those funds as anchor institutions?
Yes.
And if so, are there best practices that you're seeing beyond the CDC with the Choice Neighborhoods and the U.S. Treasury's Community Development Fund?
Yes. Yeah. I won't go so far as to say that we're far enough along on Choice Neighborhoods to get there yet. But I will say that that universities are becoming, in fact, the Georgia Tech example, I think, is a terrific one. In fact, I would encourage you to take a look at that, because I think that in Georgia, in Atlanta, the transformation that's going on in Midtown is a real mixed-use transformation. There's the traditional model of a lab, but there are the ancillary models that move in about 5 different directions in terms of industrial development and transformation, product development, and all the steps that need to be taken. The question, one of the things I would suggest for you, well, there's 2 things. First of all, I would suggest that maybe a new step for the University of Washington at Tacoma is to really get into some of the graduate professional development areas where you haven't been before, that fill in some of the new pieces that you begin to see on the landscape. I would suggest that you definitely take advantage of that. The second thing that that is really becoming more important, and this is work that my beloved wife Judith does, and that's the work that she does working with in innovation centers, with industrial, and there is a dual combination. There's the training that goes on, and you have a spectacular opportunity with your relationship with the base to do some really interesting work. And there's also the training that goes on in terms of deliverables and products that have to happen. And I think that letting Tacoma fill in some blanks is the next big step.
We're doing a project in Louisiana, and so we'll use that as a case study to offer to the
Okay.
UWC.
Yeah.
Too lazy to go over there. So my question is, you were talking about gentrification and using Chicago as the example. There's an underserved population surrounding that university. My question is, as part of your research, have you seen that demographics have changed? And then in more particular, has it changed the education level and the income level of the people surrounding the university that were there to start with?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. No,
Thank you. And see, I'm lazy, but I'm smart too, so that helps.
It's terrific. What? Now answer it. What? No, there has not been a lot of displacement. You know, one of the things, in fact, I just gave a chat last week, and someone said, it's all about gentrification and displacement. That's all you're talking about. And my response was no. No. In fact, you know, it's the development of, admittedly the drug dealers got displaced. And the pigeons got displaced. And quite frankly, there have been, in my neighborhood, where I moved in, does anyone know the central? Does anyone know the central train station area? It's where the Great Migration ended, right? There was nobody living there, so no one was displaced when we started to build those more condos and more condos and more condos than we need. But the question that I have that I think is really critical is the fact that almost every condo that was built with the exception of condominiums for aging populations, was built for market rate housing. And so the new housing, while it didn't displace anybody, did not create a lot of mixed use housing. So there is a problem. Now, the upside to that, from your point of view and from mine, is that quite frankly, what we have been able to do is that you've now got academic plans at universities all over the corridor who can now have a residential presence. And we're using that residential presence, and the way they're doing it is that they're marketing the presence. Let me give you an example. One of the examples that really blew my mind was that one of the university presidents, who will remain nameless here until later, he basically Chuck would not go, didn't want to do it, didn't want to do the university center thing, but he got involved and did it. Then he turned around and he got so excited about the whole process and the whole model of turning around the hole in the donut that he went and built an 18-story building, and now he's overextended. So one of the problems has been overextension, not displacement. Anyway. Any other questions? Yes, Mike.
Thank you for a spectacular talk. I'm here with my colleague Harris. I'm Mike Hardy from Coventry University in the UK. And we're looking to build a much stronger relationship between our university, which is right in the city centre of Coventry, and the city. And everything you said is fascinating, and we've learned a lot. But I wanted to just add another layer, and just to get your insight. My research interest is about people, not simply institutions. It's about
Right.
social development, social justice, and the impact of the dynamics that you've referred to in your last question on those very things. And one of the things we're finding in research is that the challenges in contemporary cities, particularly in the developed world, more so than the undeveloped world, is that the pace of change that's taking place, including the pace of demographic change and movement and migration, is impacting on what's possible in the time frames that some of the economic and structural developments that you've referred to require to take place. So the magical experience that we've had for 2 or 3 days looking at what's happened here, which is quite astonishing and a real lesson to take back, and lots of learning points, still requires a gestation period of many years to unfold as communities adapt and as the institutions adapt. In my city, in Coventry, we have overlaid with that an enormous acceleration of migrant change, of new people arriving, very different needs and very different demands. So how does that layer on to the notion? And it's a question I've been asking this week about, is it also the case that universities who aspire to be anchors of this kind need themselves to be rapidly adapting and changing?
Yes.
Internally?
Yes. In fact, the answer to the question is yes. But let me take it a step further, Michael, and there is another person that I'd like to mention. Her name is Helen Liggett, and she's done some spectacular work. She's along with Ananya Roy. I consider her the best urban theorist in the United States. And Liggett talks about the fact that there is this problem in the United States with this issue of urbanists who think the city is permanent. Her argument is, using the work of a French theorist that I really like, named Jacques Rancière. He's a real contrarian. Rancière says that no, things are not permanent. They never are. Witness the loss of our beloved Debra. There are things that there's always going to be, and she uses the word temporary. That cities, whether they be legacy cities like Cleveland or Tacoma, or if they're basically growth cities like Austin or the like, are always, one of the things that characterizes them is up and down. They're changing, all the time changing. And the universe, and if you come back to the fundamental empirical question that drives the research, it really is an empirical and a thesis of change. cities are not globalization centers. Cities are globalizing. It's almost like an adverbial process that's going on. And so, in essence, what the answer to your question is yes. And the empirical question is that the University of Washington, if it thinks it's permanent, it's dead. If it thinks it's in the process of making and remaking itself, of globalizing, of changing, of financing, going back to an earlier question, then quite frankly, Mike, we have done our work. The University of Washington at Tacoma today the one thing I can say for sure is it will not be the same university tomorrow. And it shouldn't be. And this city should not be the same tomorrow as it is today. It's so much more. And that's what Vivell and I have learned so much about. It's what Friedman and Menendez and I have learned over the years working together.
Thank you, David. Please join me in thanking David Perry.